right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay. So my project is titled Acoustic versus Lexical Processing when Perceiving Difficult L2 Phonetic Contrasts. And this is a view from perceptual learning. And I worked with Dr. Carlson and James McQueen in the Netherlands. All right. So just to touch on my experience a little bit, like I said, Dr. Carlson was my advisor at Penn State, and Dr. McQueen was my mentor at Radboud University in the Netherlands. And we met about once a month just to talk about the design of the study, things like that. And he was really helpful. And my project is building off of a previous PIRE study done by Jason Giovagnoli. And this was a really cool experience just to see how research progresses from one idea to the next. That was really cool to see. So some background on my project. Everybody knows that second language learners can have a hard time dealing with subtle phonetic differences in their second language. And there's evidence that in Dutch English bilinguals, they don't have the vowel a in Dutch, but they do have the vowel e. So when they hear English words like bat and bet, bat just sounds like a weird version of bet to them. And they have a hard time telling the difference between the two vowels. But then there's also this evidence that human speech perception is flexible and adapting to variation. So, for example, if you're talking to somebody who has a Southern accent, they might say pin instead of pen, but you can adapt to that, and you might, and you would know that they're trying to say pen. So this leads us to the question that if human speech perception is so flexible in adapting to variation, then why do we still have a hard time dealing with subtle phonetic differences in the second language? So where does that difficulty arise? Is it in navigating the phonetic differences that are not contrastive in the L1, or is it in mapping acoustic information to more abstract representations? And we sort of favored the second hypothesis because that flexibility in adapting to subtle variation suggests that the problem isn't merely acoustic. So what we were testing to see was how listeners respond when one difficult contrast matches the easy contrast. So in Dutch, they have difficulty with the a contrast, so something like bat and bet, but they don't have difficulty with the a contrast, so bet and bit. So what we did was we created a talker who had different accents, and we manipulated the vowels to have the a contrast acoustically match the a contrast. So I don't know if you can see my mouse, but like this bat would match this bet, and so forth. And then after getting used to the talker through sentence listening, we wanted to see would Dutch speakers still have an easier time distinguishing the e words. So we had a between subjects study that we ran on Dutch English bilinguals and native English speakers that we recruited through Prolific, and we did our vowel manipulation using Pratt. So we shifted the vowels to the midpoint of the original in the formants 1 through 3. And we also adjusted the durations to make sure that everything matched acoustically. And we did some norming on native English speakers, and we selected we recorded a bunch of tokens, and we selected the ones that were closest to 50% accuracy, just to make sure that the most ambiguous ones were in the actual study. So the design of the actual study was participants had a sentence listening task to get familiarized with the talker's vowels. So there were sentences spoken by the talker shifted in one direction, and there were, non-minimal pair words, and they were unambiguous, and they were shifted with the target vowels. And then after doing this, they went on to the visual world paradigm, and they were exposed to the same shift as in the sentence listening task, but this time there were minimal pairs with the or the a contrast. And There were also fillers that were minimal pairs that only differed in one consonant, and then refresher trials that were the same words that were in the sentences. And this was to make sure that they weren't getting untrained to the listener's accent, to the talker's accent. So this is an example of what they would see in a trial. So they would see these two words pop up on the screen. They would hear this,
Bet.
and then they would choose which one they thought it was.
Bet.
And then this is for the bet bit. They would see these two pop up on the screen, hear
Bet.
this, and then they would choose which one they thought it was.
Bet.
Shifted a. This is a downshifted bet.
Bet. Bit.
And so these, this contrast is supposed to match this contrast right here.
Bat.
Oh, I'm going to go through all of them again.
Bit.
And so what we found was that, well, let me just explain what you guys are looking at here. So this is a D prime graph. And when you look at these numbers on the left, the larger the number is, the more far apart the two vowels were in the perception of the listener. So these were the target contrasts that we were looking at. And you can see that Dutch English bilinguals still had more difficulty perceiving even when it was acoustically similar to and there were also strong bias effects that aren't shown here, but D prime accounts for this. Basically, there are like two ways to be right on these trials. You can, you know, if you're given bat and bet and the actual answer is bet, you know, you can be right because you're just choosing bet on every single trial, or you can be right because you actually heard bet and were actually right. So D prime sort of accounts for that in here. So yeah, is still harder to perceive regardless of the manipulation. And so basically what we can conclude is that the difficulty in distinguishing is depends on more abstract representations. It's more of perceiving the difference between two vowels rather than just a sound wave, because the upshifted bat bet was still more difficult to distinguish than the downshifted bet bit, despite being similar. And in general, the shift didn't affect perceptual distance for either of the vowel pairs, but it did affect response bias. And that's it for me. Just want to say thank you to all the PIRE faculty and my PIRE advisors for making this experience happen in the middle of a pandemic. It was a really great experience for me.
Thank you. So we have time for questions.
Hi, Hailey. I have a stimulus creation question. So how did you get, tell me about like how you got your recordings, and did you do anything like try to find a voice of someone who would like sound pretty like normal to people? Did you do any norming? I just want to know about your stimulus. Sorry, Kat.
My recordings were from Jason Giovagnoli's PIRE project last year. So he did most of the work with that, which was kind of nice for me. And it was just a normal English speaker. He was pretty easy to understand. We did have two talkers at one point. One of them was Dr. Carlson, but after the shift and everything, it ended up not being super ambiguous, so we had to get rid of that talker. But
okay, yeah, that's really cool. It's cool to collaborate and conserve resources by using what's already available. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
It helped with the pandemic too, to have some stimuli already recorded.
Hi, Hailey. This is a really cool study. And as a Dutch speaker, I can totally relate to how difficult it is to make these two vowel distinctions. I still can't do it. And my daughters make continuous fun of me for not being able to do so. So my question is there hope for speakers like me? So did you find any improvements in the course of the experiment? Because, you know, your listeners have been exposed to these contrasts for quite a while. So did they actually get better? Or is it a lost case?
I'll be honest, I don't know. We didn't quite look into that. But that would be something that was really interesting to look at. And I can let you know after once me and Dr. Felsen do some more analyzing. But thank you for that question.
More questions?
Well, if no one has another question, I actually had another question. So, you know, Dutch people also have a hard time with final devoicing. So in my world, bet is all the same, whereas you would pronounce, you know, the E and the A vowel differently, but also the D and the T vowel differently. So why did you decide to choose words that ended on a T? Because you're basically adding some additional complexity, and why not words ending on a K or P or?
Well, we had a lot of different stimuli. It wasn't just bat.
Oh, okay. So it was just the example. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, actually, Southern speakers don't say pin and pen, they go pin and pin. And yeah, I'm married to one. They're totally the same, but neither one of them matches what we might hear up here in Central PA.